to help and support through this committee and was one of the early appointments when I was a member of this Judiciary Committee. So thank you for that. Senator Graham.
Congratulations to you all. A lot of nice things said about each of you, and I'm sure they're deserved. And to your families, congratulations. It's a very big deal. Mr. Daniel, what'd you do in the Marines?
When I was enlisted in the reserves, I was a motor vehicle operator. When I became an officer after graduation, I was a combat engineer officer, ranking member.
That's excellent. So you've been in the prosecution lane, U.S. Attorney's Office, is that correct?
Correct.
So what's your interaction in terms of the fentanyl problem in the country? Have you had much of a chance to deal with fentanyl cases?
I have, Senator. Back in 2014, I believe it was, I was assigned an investigation following a rash of overdose deaths in Chicago. That investigation turned into a year-long wire investigation where we were able to identify the source of that fentanyl that resulted in the overdoses and then charge the organization responsible for distributing it by the organization in the Chicago area.
So during that, why did these drug groups, cartels, organizations, why do they put fentanyl in drugs without people knowing? What conclusion did you come to?
Senator, this investigation I'm referring to, in that investigation, we learned for the first time that it was being mixed locally.
Right.
My understanding, based on that investigation and from some of the testimony we received from witnesses and some of the defendants who were both users and distributors, were that the fentanyl was being added to increase the potency of the drugs. It's more profitable to dilute substances, and when they dilute, users may complain that the drugs are weak, in their words, and so the fentanyl is added, oftentimes unknowingly, unknowing to the users to increase the potency.
So Secretary Mayorkas said before the committee that he thought fentanyl problem in America is one of the greatest threats we face as a nation. Do you agree with that?
I agree that fentanyl poses a risk to all who encounter it. I've had cases involving fentanyl-related deaths, and it is very dangerous, Senator.
Okay. Do you agree with that, Mr. Herson?
I agree with my colleague that it is a significant issue that faces this country, and it's one that I see every day in my courtroom.
Yeah, so what kind of cases do you have involving fentanyl?
Well, as a United States magistrate judge, we handle the preliminary proceedings in all criminal cases. And sitting in Baltimore, which is a city like many others in this country that faces a significant heroin and fentanyl problem, we do see a lot of drug and drug-related cases.
How would you describe it in terms of the scope of the problem for Baltimore? Is it at the top of the list, middle of the list?
I'm not familiar with numbers nationwide, but I can say anecdotally it's a significant issue in our city, and it's one that when I am faced with cases presenting defendants charged with distribution of drugs, oftentimes they themselves are users of drugs. And I can say without any hesitation that our pretrial services department works very hard to try to find treatment for those individuals. And I know firsthand there are a large number of people in the city working very hard to address the problem from the top to the bottom.
Where does most of the fentanyl come from in Baltimore? Do you know?
I do not know. I know as much as anyone who reads the paper. I understand there are foreign sources. I hear from my colleague there may be domestic sources.
Okay. But would you understand why this committee would want to do more, both of you, to deter fentanyl use and distribution? Does that make sense to you, given your interaction with the drug?
Thank you, Ranking Member Graham. I think I can't speak for what the committee would want to do, Ranking Member, but my office in Chicago, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois, has identified fentanyl as a priority, and since that case back in 2014, it's remained a priority.
Thank you. Mr. Papillon, last question. On occasion, a district court judge will issue an order that affects the entire nation. Under what circumstances do you think that's appropriate, and how would you handle that issue?
Thank you, Senator. National injunctions are governed by Rule 65 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. It's a very serious issue. In the Fifth Circuit has held that district judges have the authority, because they are judges of the United States, to issue those. I can tell you that if faced with that, I would study it very carefully, follow the applicable precedents, and try to make the right decision, because obviously when one issues an injunction beyond the four corners of a case, that is of tremendous magnitude and is to be treated very seriously, and I would.
Senator Padilla?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Congratulations